recording, I'm going to show how to get started with the paint tools to do some simple handwriting effects and other paint type effects. So here's an example of what I'll be recreating. So I'll start by making a new project, starting from scratch. No need to import anything unless you want to paint directly on a photograph or video. In this case, I'm just going to create a new composition. I'm going to call it Paint Demo. I'm going to use my same settings as last time. And duration here, I'm just going to plug in 10 seconds. All right, so the paint tools are this group of tools right here in the toolbar, the paintbrush. There's a clone stamp brush and an eraser brush. So for doing a handwriting effect, I'm going to use the paintbrush. Now, to use the paintbrush, you have to have a layer to paint on. So I'll go to Layer, New, Solid, creating a solid color card layer to do my painting work on. Choose whatever color you want and hit OK. Now, if you try and paint directly in the composition window, you're going to get this warning that tells you that you got to use the paint tools in the layer panel. So if that happens, hit OK, and double click your layer to isolate your layer in the layer panel. And right away, you'll see that the cursor shows up as a brush size. Now, to change the brush size, you can use the brush panel, which may or may not open automatically on the side of your screen. If you go to Window and go to Brushes, it should be somewhere. Window, brushes, there it is. I'll bring it over here. So you can change, you can choose from different preset sizes, and you can use the diameter controls there. A shortcut, though, for changing the brush size is to hold down the Command key on the Mac or the Control key on your PC, and then click and drag to the left or the right to make the brush bigger or smaller. Now you can choose the color you're going to paint with in the Paint panel, which, again, this panel should open up on your screen when you first choose the tool. If it doesn't, you can grab it from the Window menu. And just like in Photoshop, you'll see a foreground color and a background color that you can click on to customize your color choice. Now, the way the paint tool works is actually an effect. And when you click and you paint, so let's say I just click and paint and make a line like that. If I look at my effect control panel, you'll see it's added an effect called Paint, but there's no settings in the effect controls. The settings for the paint effect are all under the layer in the timeline. If you open up your layer, go to Effects, go to Paint, open up that group, you'll see that for the brush stroke that you took, there's a brush group. If you open that up, you'll see that there's a few groups of settings there, stroke options and some transform options. So each brush stroke that you take, like let's say I took another one, now there are two brush groups on the layer. So kind of like shape layers, each brush group becomes its own editable object. Each has its own transform values to change the scale or the rotation. Okay, you can still, of course, rotate the entire layer. Right, if I go to the layer rotation and back out here in the composition view, I can rotate the entire layer. Okay, but the point I'm getting at is if we want to transform the individual brush strokes, we can use the transform properties within the brush group. All right, now I'm going to delete that second brush group by just clicking on it and hitting delete, and I'm just going to work with this one brush group that I have here. So you've got your transform options for scaling, rotating, and positioning that brush stroke. You've also got your stroke options if you want to change the color after you've drawn it. Say I want to choose a different color, or if I wanted to animate the color. I could change the diameter of the brush after having drawn the brush stroke, the angle, hardness, and some other settings as well. Now, the main thing I wanted to point out here is the start and the end points. When you make a brush stroke, you can animate or control the start and end points of that line. And this, of course, is how you can do handwriting effects, by animating the end point of the line. So let's say I wanted this, squiggly line to animate across. I could animate the endpoint going from 0 at time 0 and then go a few seconds later. And I could crank it up to 100. And that will animate the brush stroke, and reveal it. All right. So what about doing some handwriting? Well, let me go ahead and close that brush group. Go back to my layer here. And now I'll go ahead and do another example. So I'll go ahead and handwrite something. Now, of course, if I let go of the mouse, that'll be the end of that brush group. So it is for handwriting. If you do it in sentence case, you'll end up with lots of brush groups. Now again, if I want to animate that line, I go into the stroke options, animate the endpoint. This is the basic idea for doing a handwriting effect. If we keyframe the endpoint and then go a few seconds forward, bring it back out to 100, that will create the handwriting effect. Now there is a way to get After Effects to set those keyframes for you automatically. So let me show that. I'll delete this brush group number 2 and do it again. But this time, in the paint panel, I want to point out the duration option. By default, the duration for our brush strokes is set to constant. And if I zoom out on my timeline here, you can see that my brush group has kind of like a layer bar with an in point and an out point that I can click on and control, where that brush stroke is visible, or what portion of the timeline that brush stroke will be visible. Okay, so by default, that duration is set to constant. So each brush stroke that you take will be there for the full length of your timeline. If you click on that duration option, the next option you'll see though is a write-on option. If you choose that option and then you do your handwriting, so I'll go ahead and do the same thing here. When I let go, it's going to disappear. Why is it disappearing? Because it's automatically setting endpoint keyframes. See, it automatically set the endpoint keyframes for me to create the handwriting effect. So instead of me having to do it, manually, it set them automatically at the same, duration that it took me to write that out. So you can use that write-on option to record the animation automatically. Now notice that when I did that, it actually replaced my squiggly line because I had the squiggly line group selected. So that is something worth pointing out here. If you have a brush group selected and then you draw, it's going to replace the one that you had selected. So if you want to create a new one, make sure you click away from that brush group. Just go back to the top of the layer here, deselecting that first group, and then you can go ahead and create a second brush group on that same layer. But if you do have one selected, it will replace it. Okay, and notice that when I did it that time, the in point is where the time marker was. I could slide it over if I wanted, adjusting the in and out points just like you would with a layer. Now, I'll hit the U key to reveal the keyframes that I've created, and that way I can maybe slide my keyframes around to control my timing here if I wanted the word to write out first and then the squiggly line to animate across, like that. All right, and the next thing that I want to show as far as paint effects, going back to this duration pop-up menu, is you've also got options here for single frame and custom number of frames, which if you want to do more sort of traditional animation type of stuff, these are good features to know about. So I'll go ahead and close this layer, and I'll use another layer here to do my example. Let me make another solid layer, double clicking it to get it in the layer window. Now this time I'm going to set the duration option to, I could do single frame, I'm going to do custom frame, and notice when you do custom, you get the number of frames here. So I'm going to do this on 3 frame increments, and you'll see what I mean here when I do it. So let's say I'm going to do a little sparkle effect. I'm going to start by making my brush a little smaller by holding the command key. I'm going to start by just making like a little plus, like that. All right, now if I open up my layer, go to my effect or go to my paint group. Now here's a tip actually. If you hit the letter P twice, PP, for paint properties, it'll solo out those paint groups for you. So you can see there's the 2 brush groups that I just created. But because I've got the duration set to custom 3 frames, if I zoom in here, you can see that the duration of each of those brush strokes is only 3 frames long. So I'm going to go a couple frames forward, and now I'm going to do some more brush strokes. I'm going to make this plus, I'm going to make this go like that, that, and then I'm going to make another little line there, and a little line there. Okay, go a couple more frames forward. I'm going to repeat this process here, extending these lines a little bit each time, like that. And maybe just a few more times here, just to carry it out. Maybe I'll put a little dot in the center. There we go. Now let me hit play and see how that's looking. All right, that's kind of cool. A little, sparkle effect, a little traditional animation kind of sparkle effect there. So you can see how by using the duration setting here and setting it to either single frame or a custom number of frames, you can use the paint tools to create, more traditional type animation effects. And of course you can go in there and fine tune your in and out points. Like maybe I want to change this to, shorten these, because I did it on 3s, but I kind of did that so I could overlap and see the previous drawing as I was doing the next drawing. Now I'll set it to 2s, and let's see how it looks. Maybe a little better. Okay, good enough. I'll close that layer down. Now, let me turn both my layers back on here, go to my composition view, and I would like my sparkle here. Let me rename that layer. I'm going to call it sparkle. And this one here was my handwriting. Handwriting, there we go. I would like to be able to see the handwriting and the sparkle together. So kind of an important option here in the paint effect that I wanted to point out. Actually, you can see it right here in the effect controls. It's the only thing that actually shows up in the effect control panel. Paint on transparent. If we turn that on, it makes the color of the solid layer become transparent, so we can composite one effect on top of the other, or one paint layer on top of the other. So now I want to be able to duplicate this sparkle that I've created a couple times and place it in different spots within the composite here. So what I'm going to do is pre-compose that layer so that I can easily duplicate it and use it more than once. So I'll select that layer, I'll do a pre-compose, and I'm going to move the attributes into the new pre-comp. And I'm also going to trim an out point for that by clicking the out point and dragging it over, or typing Option and the right bracket key. And the reason I did that is because I want to be able to place it right here where my handwriting finishes. So I'm going to click on it and drag it over, and I'm going to position it. See, and by pre-composing it, it makes it easy for me to pick up and move the whole thing. I can also use my layer scale value if I want to scale that down a little bit. And I'm going to position it right there, so when the handwriting finishes, little sparkle effect happens. And then I'll do the same thing right here after the squiggly line. So, and I'll just duplicate that pre-comp, Command D, hitting the left bracket key to slide it over, and that one I'm going to position right there. All right, I'll set the end of my work area, hitting the letter N on the keyboard, and then hit play and see how it looks. All right, there we go. Simple little paint effect. Hopefully this helps to get you started using the paint tools in After Effects, as well as showing you how to do a cool handwriting effect. I'll see you in the next one.